His family insulted me, and he just sat there, watching. The words still echo in my head, over and over again, like the ticking of the antique clock that hung in the Hale family's dining room that night. Every tick was a reminder of how small I felt, how utterly misplaced. I was among people who looked at me as though I had accidentally wandered into their world. The rain had started just as Nathan and I arrived at his parents' mansion on the outskirts of Savannah. Through the tinted car window, I could see the reflection of my nervous smile. I had spent the whole afternoon pressing the one dress I thought looked the most appropriate. Pale blue, modest neckline, hemmed just below the knee, professional, polite, unassuming. That's what I was told women like me should be when meeting people like them. When the maid opened the door, the smell of expensive candles and roasted lamb filled the air. The chandelier above the foyer looked like a constellation of tiny suns, too bright, too perfect. I followed Nathan through the marble hallway, clutching my small purse, rehearsing polite things to say. Mrs. Hale was the first to greet us. Or maybe greet wasn't the right word. She extended her hand the way one would to an employee, fingers stiff, palm cold. Her diamonds sparkled like tiny icicles. "So, you're Elena," she said, her voice smooth but sharp. "Nathan mentioned you're in design." "I'm a seamstress," I said, smiling as politely as I could. "I run a small tailoring shop downtown." Her painted lips curved slightly, but her eyes didn't. "Oh. You sew for a living? How quaint." I felt my stomach twist, but I forced a laugh. "It's honest work. I love it." Across the table, Mr. Hale cleared his throat. "Nathan, son, didn't we talk about this? You need someone who can support your social life, not someone who spends her days with a needle and thread." I looked to Nathan, waiting, hoping, begging for him to say something. He glanced down at his plate, adjusting his cufflinks. The sound of silver clinking against china filled the silence. He didn't say a word. The rest of dinner blurred together in pieces, the polite laughter, the subtle insults disguised as conversation. The way Mrs. Hale asked me if I'd ever traveled outside the Midwest, the look on Mr. Hale's face when I said I hadn't. I remember the way my heart pounded so loud I barely heard the rain hitting the windows. Every time they spoke, I shrank smaller. I told myself it was just nerves, that they were testing me, that Nathan would defend me afterward. But when Mrs. Hale leaned closer, her voice soft as silk and just as cutting, "I suppose it must be comforting, knowing you can always mend your own clothes if things don't work out." I knew there wouldn't be an afterward. I set down my fork. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. "Thank you for dinner," I said quietly. Nathan looked up, startled. "Elena," but I was already standing. I walked out through the front door, past the marble steps, past the glowing lanterns that lined the driveway. The rain soaked through my dress instantly. My heels slipped on the wet stone, but I didn't stop. Behind me, I thought I heard Nathan call my name once, faintly, but it didn't matter anymore. The cold air burned my lungs as I kept walking. Streetlights blurred through the raindrops. Every breath came out like smoke, every step heavier than the last. Somewhere between the mansion and the main road, the tears finally came, hot, uncontrollable, humiliating. When I reached the corner where the city lights met the open road, I stopped. Cars passed, spraying water across my legs. I didn't care. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered, "Why wasn't I enough?" There was no answer. Just thunder. By the time I made it back to my apartment, my hair clung to my face, my dress ruined, my mascara long gone. Mom was waiting by the window, her thin frame wrapped in a shawl. When she saw me, she didn't ask what happened. She just opened her arms. I collapsed into her embrace, the smell of lavender and laundry soap wrapping around me like safety. She brushed my wet hair from my cheek. "Did he hurt you?" she asked softly. I shook my head, but the truth slipped out anyway. He didn't have to. That night, while the storm raged outside, I lay awake listening to the rhythm of my mother's breathing in the next room. Every now and then, I caught the faint tick of her heart monitor. The sound mingled with the echo of the dining room clock in my head. 2 steady beats, hers and mine, both fragile, both fighting to keep going. I thought about the Hale mansion, the glimmering chandelier, the way Mrs. Hale's laughter sliced through the air like glass. I thought about Nathan's silence, the kind that said this isn't worth the fight, and in that moment, I realized something bitterly simple: silence could be louder than cruelty. The rain didn't stop until morning. When I finally drifted to sleep, I dreamed of fabric, torn seams, broken threads, and a single needle lying in the dark. I didn't know then that one day, I would use that needle to sew my life back together, but for now, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, and whispered into the quiet, "I deserve better than silence." The morning after that dinner, sunlight poured weakly through the lace curtains of our little apartment on Maple Street. It was the kind of light that didn't warm anything, just revealed how quiet everything had become. My sewing machine sat by the window, silent, threads tangled from the last unfinished dress I'd been working on before the dinner that broke my heart. Mom was already awake. sitting in her worn armchair with a cup of chamomile tea, her thin fingers trembling slightly as she turned the pages of a magazine. She looked up when she heard me shuffle into the kitchen. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. I poured myself a cup of cold coffee and tried to smile. A little. Her eyes, pale blue, gentle but sharp, studied me in silence. "You don't have to pretend, sweetheart. I know that look. I had it once too." I sank into the chair across from her. "What look?" "The one you get when you realize love can be cowardly." Her words landed softly, but they cut deep. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched the steam fade from my coffee and traced the rim of the cup with my thumb. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender detergent and fabric dust, my life condensed into 50 square meters of sewing, mending, and making ends meet. Every corner of that space told a story: the spool rack Dad built before he passed away, the old calendar marked with delivery deadlines, the drawer full of scraps I couldn't bear to throw away because every color reminded me of something I'd once hoped for. When Nathan and I first met, he used to say my hands were made for beautiful things. I believed him. I believed everything he said: his promises of taking me to Europe someday, of buying me a studio, of introducing me to a life where people respected what I did. But that night at his parents' house proved it had all been just words dressed up in politeness. Mom reached for my hand. Her palm felt paper thin but steady. "You're stronger than you think, Lena," she whispered, calling me by the nickname only she used. "People like them, they see silk and gold. But the real beauty of a thread is that it holds everything together when the seams start to break." I nodded, swallowing hard. That afternoon, I forced myself back to work. The sewing machine came to life again, its rhythmic hum filling the apartment. It was the only sound that made sense anymore. I stitched a hemline, adjusted a sleeve, ironed a dress. Every motion felt mechanical at first, but after a while, it started to calm me, creating order out of chaos. That's what sewing had always been for me. You take something torn, frayed, or unfinished, and through patience, you give it purpose again. Customers came and went throughout the week. Mrs. Doyle, who always ordered skirts 2 sizes too big just in case. The college student who needed her prom dress fixed at the last minute. The older man who brought in his late wife's coat, asking if I could repair the lining because it still smells like her perfume. Each of them carried their own kind of heartbreak. And somehow, fixing their clothes helped mend mine, just a little. Still, the nights were the hardest. That's when memories of Nathan crept back, wearing that same smile he'd given me when he promised forever. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner in my mind, his silence, his mother's smirk. The way my name had sounded so small in that house. One evening, as I closed the shop early, Mom called from the other room, coughing lightly. "Lena, don't stay up too late sewing again." I smiled faintly. "I won't." But I did. The hours slipped by as I worked under the warm glow of the desk lamp. Fabric piled up beside me like soft snowdrifts. When my fingers brushed against a small scar on my wrist, a faint white line from when I was 16 and accidentally cut myself while trimming lace, I paused. That scar had always embarrassed me. But now, it felt symbolic, a reminder that even when something breaks the skin, it can heal and still function. Maybe even stronger. I finished the last stitch of a wedding dress that night. The irony didn't escape me. The delicate ivory fabric shimmered under the lamplight, every bead sewn with precision and care. It was for a young bride named Claire who had saved for months to afford it. When she came to pick it up the next morning, she gasped softly. "It's perfect," she said. "You have magic hands." I smiled. "No, just practice and a lot of patience." She hesitated at the door before turning back. "You must really love what you do." I looked down at my thread-covered fingers. "It's the only thing that's never lied to me." That night, after she left, Mom came into the sewing room. "You made another bride happy," she said softly, setting down a cup of tea beside me. "That's something, isn't it?" "Yeah," I whispered, my throat tight. "It's something." Outside, the rain began again, tapping gently against the windows. But this time, it didn't feel cruel. It sounded like rhythm, steady, familiar, almost like the hum of my sewing machine. I didn't know it yet, but the world was quietly rearranging itself. Threads I couldn't see were already being woven together, one of them leading to a stranger on a bus who would soon change everything. For now, all I could do was keep stitching, one seam at a time, holding together the fragile fabric of my life. The morning air smelled like rain and old asphalt. I stood at the bus terminal, clutching my worn leather bag, unsure where I was really going. Maybe anywhere that wasn't here. Des Moines had begun to feel like a box that was closing in on me, the same streets, the same faces, the same reminders of Nathan Hale and the silence that had cost me everything. I told Mom I needed a few days to clear my head. She had smiled weakly, though her lips were pale from exhaustion. "Go," she said. "You can't sew hearts back together when yours is still bleeding." So I went. The bus hissed as it pulled into the station, the smell of diesel sharp in the air. I climbed aboard, found a window seat, and pressed my forehead against the cool glass. The city rolled past, laundromats, pawn shops, a bakery I used to visit with Mom. Everything felt muted, drained of color. Halfway through the ride, the bus stopped again. A small crowd shuffled in, college students, a man in a suit, and a frail elderly woman clutching a purse to her chest. She hesitated near the driver, her voice soft but trembling. I thought I had enough for the fare. I must have misplaced, the driver sighed impatiently. Ma'am, you'll have to step aside if you can't pay. The passengers stared ahead, pretending not to hear. That silence, the same kind I'd heard at that dinner table, pressed against my ribs. Before I even thought about it, I stood up and said, "It's fine. I'll cover her fare." The woman turned toward me, her eyes glistening. "Oh, dear, you don't have to, it's just a few dollars," I said gently, handing the driver the cash. "She's good." The driver shrugged, punched the ticket, and waved her through. When the woman sat beside me, she smiled with a warmth that felt out of place in that cold, gray bus. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm Evelyn Parker." "Elena," I said, smiling faintly. "No problem, really." She clutched her purse tighter. "I'm on my way to the hospital in Cedar Falls. My grandson had an accident. They said he's stable now, but..." Her voice faltered. "I just need to see him with my own eyes." Something in her trembling hands reminded me of Mom, the same fragility, the same stubborn strength beneath it. "I hope he'll be okay," I said softly. She reached over and patted my arm. "You're kind, Elena. The world still has good hearts, even if it likes to hide them." We rode mostly in silence after that. She dozed off halfway, her head tilted slightly toward me. And I found myself guarding her, making sure she didn't fall over whenever the bus turned sharply. When the bus reached her stop, she stood and smiled again. "I'll never forget this." "It was nothing," I said, but later, I would realize, it wasn't nothing at all. When I got home that evening, the apartment was too quiet. The faint sound of the ticking clock filled the space like a heartbeat. "Mom?" I called out, setting my bag down. No answer. I walked toward the kitchen and froze. She was lying on the floor, her tea spilled beside her, her face pale as porcelain. "Mom!" I dropped to my knees, shaking her shoulders. Her pulse was faint, shallow. The next hour blurred into sirens, flashing lights, paramedics shouting numbers I couldn't understand. At the hospital, they rushed her into the emergency room, leaving me in the waiting area, the smell of antiseptic burning my nose. My hands shaking uncontrollably. A doctor in blue scrubs came out later, his expression grave. "Your mother has a severe heart condition. We've stabilized her for now, but she needs surgery, soon." "How soon?" "Within days." My throat tightened. "What does it cost?" He hesitated. 100,000. Maybe more. $100,000. The words might as well have been in another language. I felt my knees give out, and I sank into the nearest chair. "We'll do everything we can," the doctor said gently. "But time is critical." After he left, I sat there in the cold fluorescent light, my thoughts spinning. Mom's words echoed in my head. "You can't sew hearts back together when yours is bleeding." Now hers was the one breaking, and I had no thread strong enough to fix it. I took out my phone. My thumb hovered over Nathan's name for a long time. I didn't want to call him. Every part of me screamed not to. But desperation doesn't ask for permission. When he answered, his voice was calm, bored, even. "Elena?" I swallowed. "Nathan, please, I need help. My mom, she's in the hospital. It's serious." "I wouldn't call if," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "Elena, don't make up stories to get money from me." The silence that followed was unbearable. "I'm not lying," I whispered. "She's dying." "Then I'm sorry. But I can't help you." Click, the line went dead. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. I stared at it until the screen went dark. My chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and pulled the air out of me. Outside the hospital window, the rain began again. Thin streaks of water ran down the glass like tiny rivers, blurring the lights of the city beyond. I buried my face in my hands and whispered, "Please? Just one miracle." And though I didn't know it then, the miracle was already on its way, wearing a kind smile and the memory of a bus ride where kindness had changed everything. The hospital smelled like bleach and hopelessness. I'd been sitting in that hard plastic chair for hours, watching the clock tick in slow, merciless rhythm. Every tick felt like a countdown, not to relief, but to loss. Mom was in the emergency room, her skin pale, her breathing shallow. The doctor's words still echoed in my head. "She needs immediate surgery. It's her only chance." $100,000. I could barely afford rent on my sewing studio, let alone a miracle like that. I stared at the white tiles, at my trembling hands, and thought of the only person I knew who could possibly help. Nathan. The man who once promised he'd take care of me. The man whose family made me feel like dirt, and who watched in silence still. My heart whispered, Maybe he'll remember he once loved you. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over his name. It felt humiliating, but desperation doesn't leave room for pride. I pressed call. The ringing lasted forever. Then his voice, smooth and cold as marble, Elena? Just hearing it made something in me ache. Nathan. I wouldn't call you unless it was serious. My voice cracked. My mom, she collapsed. The doctors say she needs surgery right away. I don't know who else to. He cut me off. Elena, don't do this. Do what? I whispered, make up stories to get money from me. The words didn't register at first. They just hung there, heavy, impossible. What? Nathan, I'm not. I know you're struggling, but you can't use me anymore. My parents were right. You're not honest about what you want. There it was, the same silence he gave me that night at dinner, sharpened into a knife. My voice shook. You think I'm lying about my mother being in surgery? I don't know what to think anymore, he said quietly. But I can't get involved. I'm sorry. And just like that, he hung up. The line went dead, and so did something inside me. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. My face looked like someone else's, someone older, emptier. I tried to stand, but my knees gave out, and I sank back into the chair. Around me, the hospital hummed with quiet tragedy, nurses calling names. Wheels squeaking on linoleum, someone crying softly down the hall. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a whisper, please. It wasn't to Nathan anymore. Not even to God. It was to the universe, to anyone listening, please, I just need one miracle. Tears slid down my cheeks, silent and relentless. My hands still shook as I clutched Mom's scarf, the one she'd made me when I was a child, with frayed threads and the faint scent of lavender. I pressed it to my chest like a prayer. I thought of the night rain outside the Hale mansion, how cold it had been, how I'd walked away thinking heartbreak was the worst pain a person could feel. I was wrong. Watching someone you love slip away while you're helpless. That was worse. I didn't know how long I sat there. Minutes, maybe hours. The world blurred into sterile lights and exhaustion. I kept replaying the call in my mind, his voice, the disbelief, the final click. It wasn't just rejection. It was erasure. As if I'd never mattered. Eventually, I found myself walking toward the vending machine. My wallet was empty except for a few crumpled bills. I bought a black coffee and sat back down, staring at it until it went cold. Mom once told me, when life tears the fabric, don't panic. You just have to find the right thread to mend it. But tonight, I couldn't find any thread left. I felt like the fabric of my life had ripped clean through, no seams, no edges to hold on to. Just darkness and silence, and somewhere in that silence, I whispered again, to no one in particular, I just need one miracle. Hospitals have a strange way of swallowing time. Days don't pass, they dissolve. I must have dozed off in the waiting room, curled in the same chair, clutching Mom's scarf. When I woke up, the light outside was gray, thin, and tired. My coffee was still untouched, cold as stone. Miss? A soft voice called. Are you all right? I looked up, and blinked in disbelief. Standing in front of me was the same elderly woman from the bus. The one I'd helped pay the fare for just days ago. Her silver hair was pinned neatly beneath a floral scarf, and her gentle eyes widened when she recognized me. Oh my goodness. You're the young lady from the bus. I tried to stand, but my legs trembled. Mrs. Parker, right? She smiled faintly. Evelyn Parker. I never got to thank you properly that day. Because of you, I got to the hospital in time. I frowned, still dazed. In time? She nodded. My grandson, Benjamin, was in a terrible car accident that morning. They weren't sure he would make it. If I had missed that bus. Her voice broke softly, I might not have seen him awake. For a moment, I forgot my own pain. Is he all right? Yes, thanks to the doctors, and to you. Her hand found mine, frail but steady. I prayed I'd get a chance to see you again. And here you are. I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. I guess we both ended up in hospitals for reasons we didn't choose. Something in my tone must have revealed more than I meant, because her expression changed. What happened, dear? And I told her. Not everything, just enough. The dinner, the humiliation, my mother collapsing, the call that broke me all over again. When I finished, Evelyn's eyes glistened. Oh, my sweet girl. She whispered. You didn't deserve that. Her gaze drifted toward the hallway, where the ICU sign flickered faintly. Your mother? Is she needs heart surgery, I said quietly. They can't wait much longer. But I don't have the money. For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. She looked down at our joined hands, my young, trembling fingers against her weathered, steady ones. Then she squeezed gently. Wait here, she said softly. Before I could ask why, she stood up and walked away. Minutes passed. Maybe 10. Maybe 20. My heart beat so hard it hurt. I thought she'd gone for good. Then I heard a voice, calm, low, and unfamiliar. Miss Brooks. I turned out. A tall man stood beside Evelyn. He looked no older than his mid-30s, dressed in a dark sweater, his left arm still wrapped in a brace. His eyes, deep, steady, and impossibly kind, met mine. "This is my grandson," Evelyn said with quiet pride. "Benjamin." He extended a hand. "I owe you a thank you." I blinked. "For what?" "For my life," he said simply. "Grandma told me what you did. If she hadn't made it that day, I wouldn't have seen her before. Well, before things got better." I shook my head quickly. "You don't owe me anything. It was just bus fare." Benjamin smiled, a little sadly. "You call it bus fare. We call it grace." Before I could respond, Evelyn leaned closer to him and whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded once, then turned back to me. "I heard about your mother," he said gently. "The doctors said she needs surgery immediately." My chest tightened. "Yes, but I'll cover the cost." The words hit me like a wave. "What?" "I'll pay for it. All of it," he said, his tone quiet but certain. "You saved someone dear to me. Let me do the same for you." I shook my head, tears welling up. "I can't accept that. You don't even know me." He smiled softly. "Sometimes you don't need to know someone to recognize something good." I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to steady my voice. "Why would you do this?" Benjamin looked at his grandmother, then back at me. "Because kindness deserves to come full circle." The dam inside me broke. I didn't sob, I just wept silently, all the exhaustion, humiliation, and despair melting away in quiet tears. Evelyn wrapped her arms around me, her lavender perfume reminding me faintly of my mother's embrace. When she pulled back, she whispered, "You gave me time I wouldn't have had. Now let me give you hope you thought was gone." That night, I sat by Mom's bedside as the doctors prepared for surgery. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. The world outside still raged with storms and heartbreak. But inside that room, between the hum of machines and the faint sound of breathing, something shifted. Maybe miracles didn't come in flashes of light, maybe they came in small, unexpected circles, like a bus ride, a handful of coins, and a stranger who remembered. And as I watched the monitors blink steadily beside my mother, I whispered through my tears, "Thank you, whoever you are." The smell of disinfectant still lingered in the air, but for the first time in weeks, it didn't make me shiver. Mom was awake, smiling, breathing on her own. When I walked into her room that morning, sunlight spilled across her bed like something sacred. Her lips curved weakly. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice raspy, "you look like you haven't slept in days." I laughed through my tears. "Neither have you, Mom. The nurse said she'd be discharged in a week if recovery stayed on track." I wanted to hug every person in that hospital, the surgeons, the janitors, the cafeteria lady. But when I turned toward the doorway, I froze. Benjamin stood there, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Good news travels fast," he said with a gentle grin. Mom's eyes lit up when I introduced him. He spoke with her easily, as though they weren't strangers at all. I watched as my mother, the woman who had lost faith in people years ago, smiled at a man she'd just met. There was something healing in that alone. After Mom was discharged, Benjamin continued to stop by. At first, I thought it was obligation, some quiet sense of charity. But he never made me feel small, never spoke like he was doing me a favor. Instead, he listened. He asked about my work, how I designed dresses, how I used to stay up sewing until dawn. One afternoon, he dropped by my apartment with coffee and a folder. "You said you've always dreamed of opening your own studio, right?" I frowned. "That was before everything." He set the folder on the table. Inside were sketches, my sketches. The ones I'd posted years ago on an old-fashioned blog. "I might have done some digging," he said with a playful shrug. "You're talented, Elena. Really talented." I looked away, cheeks flushing. "Dreams are expensive." He leaned back in his chair. "So is regret." His tone was light, but something in his gaze made my heart twist. "What are you saying?" "I want to help you start again," he said simply. "A small shop. Just you, a sewing machine, and a chance to build what you deserve." I shook my head, instantly defensive. "I can't let you do that. You've already done enough." He smiled softly. "This isn't pity. It's belief." The words hit deeper than I expected. Belief, something I hadn't felt from anyone in a long time. Benjamin continued, "I've invested in companies my whole life. Some succeed, some fail. But you," his eyes held mine steadily, "you fix things. You don't throw them away." I bit my lip, blinking fast. "I fix fabric, Ben. Not lives." He chuckled. "Maybe. But that's where every kind of healing starts, one stitch at a time." That night, I sat awake by the window, the city glowing faintly outside. I thought about the countless dresses I'd mended for others, brides, debutantes, women wanting to look beautiful for someone else, but I'd never sewn something for me. By the end of that week, Benjamin handed me a set of keys. "It's just a small space downtown," he said. "Needs some paint. And a name." The building was old but charming, brick walls, wide windows, and a creaky wooden floor that smelled faintly of dust and sunlight. When I stepped inside, my heart fluttered like it hadn't in months. I turned to him. This doesn't feel real. He smiled. Then make it real. We spent the next few weeks cleaning, painting, setting up mannequins and fabric racks. He'd bring coffee every morning, sometimes lunch. Always with that quiet smile that made the air feel lighter. I painted the words Brooks Atelier on the front window, simple, elegant, and entirely mine. When the first customer walked in, a young woman needing her mother's wedding dress restored, I almost cried. I took the gown gently in my hands, tracing the faded lace, the loose threads, the story waiting to be reborn. As I worked, Mom would sit in the corner, reading, her cheeks pink with health again. Benjamin dropped by every few days, offering new fabrics or helping fix the stubborn light fixture I kept ignoring. One evening, when the last customer left, I found him waiting by the door. The sunset spilled through the glass, turning everything golden. You're doing it, he said quietly. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. I guess I am. He hesitated, then added, you know, when I met you in that hospital, I thought I was helping someone who'd lost everything. Turns out, you were the one reminding me what it means to start over. Something in his words made me ache in the best way. You talk like a man who's lived through storms. He laughed softly. Haven't we both? We stood there for a long moment, the air warm, filled with the smell of fabric and faint traces of jasmine from Mom's window garden. For the first time since that horrible dinner, I felt whole again, not because someone saved me, but because someone saw me. And as Benjamin turned to leave, he said the words that stayed with me long after he was gone. I didn't invest in a shop, Elena. I invested in you. That night, as I turned the closed sign and looked out into the quiet street, I realized something profound. Kindness doesn't vanish. It circles back, mended and multiplied, finding its way home. The bell above the door chimed softly, a sound I'd come to love more than any song. Brooks Atelier was alive. Laughter filled the room, mingled with the rustle of satin and the shimmer of champagne flutes. The air smelled of roses and fabric starch, of new beginnings. It had been 1 year. 1 year since the night I walked out into the rain, heart shattered and shoes soaked. 1 year since my mother's surgery, since that miracle bus ride. Since Benjamin Parker had walked quietly into my story and refused to leave. Mom stood by the counter now, radiant in a lavender dress. Mrs. Evelyn sat near the window, her silver hair catching the afternoon light as she chatted with customers. And Ben, he was across the room, talking to a reporter from the Willow Gazette, smiling that easy, steady smile of his. I thought my heart couldn't hold more gratitude. But life has a way of surprising you, sometimes with pain, sometimes with peace. The door opened again, and the air changed. I looked up. Nathan Hale stood in the doorway. For a second, I didn't recognize him. Gone was the tailored suit, the confident grin. His tie hung loose, his eyes hollow. He looked smaller, as if the weight of the world had pressed him into something fragile. Elena, he said quietly. The room seemed to fade. The chatter dulled. My fingers froze on the spool of thread I was holding. He took a hesitant step forward. You look happy. I nodded. I am. He smiled weakly, eyes darting around the shop. You did all this yourself? I hesitated before answering. Not by myself. But yes, it's mine. He swallowed hard. My family? We lost everything. The company, the estate, it's all gone. It happened so fast. Someone pulled the strings, I don't even know who. The words hung in the air, sharp and strange. Behind him, the late afternoon light spilled through the doorway like gold dust. I glanced toward the corner. Benjamin stood there, still talking to the reporter, his expression calm, unreadable. But when his eyes met mine, just for a heartbeat, something flickered, a quiet understanding. No words. No explanations. Just that look. I turned back to Nathan. He was waiting, desperate for sympathy, maybe even forgiveness. Once I might have given it. Now, I simply said, sometimes life just fixes itself, one stitch at a time. His face tightened, confusion flickering into guilt. You think I deserve this? I exhaled slowly. I think we all get the seams we sow. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The man who once couldn't defend me now couldn't defend himself. When he finally turned to leave, the bell above the door chimed again, that same soft sound of endings disguised as beginnings. The moment he was gone, Ben appeared beside me, offering a glass of champagne. You okay? He asked gently. I smiled, watching the last traces of Nathan fade down the sunlit street. More than okay. He followed my gaze but didn't ask. He never did. That was what I loved most, the quiet understanding between us, the kind that didn't need to be spoken. Your mother's been bragging about you again, he said, grinning. Told Mrs. Evelyn you're the best designer in the county. I laughed. She's biased. Ben raised his glass. To bias, and to the woman who sews miracles. We clinked glasses lightly. The sound was delicate, like crystal and hope. As the celebration went on, I slipped away for a moment, standing before the large mirror in the fitting room. The woman staring back wasn't the same girl who'd once walked through the rain in a borrowed dress. Her eyes were steady. Her heart, though once torn apart, was whole again, each scar a stitch stronger than the last. I reached out, touching the reflection softly. He didn't just break my heart, I whispered to the woman in the mirror. He taught me how to sew it back stronger. Outside, the golden light of evening filled the shop. Mom laughed with Mrs. Evelyn. Ben stood by the door, greeting new customers, his smile warm and unwavering. And me? I took a deep breath, turned the open sign to face the world again, and stepped forward, into a life I'd made with my own 2 hands, because sometimes, justice doesn't shout. Sometimes it's just the sound of a needle pulling through fabric, steady, patient, and unstoppable.